Alright everybody, it's me, Roku, back with some early content, and I've made another tier list video for you guys. It's the end of the season, we got 1 week left, so we all gotta play our best champions to climb as much as possible. And this tier list video is to basically give you a snapshot of the meta of top lane towards the end of the season. So we got our 2 tier lists right here, one for low elo and one for high elo. We're going to go through them one by one, tier by tier, and talk about which are the best champions to pick, which are the worst champions to pick, and also what champions you actually can pick, but you should be very careful of when you pick them because they're quite specific in terms of what they accomplish. So yeah, let's just get right into it. Starting off with S-Tier for low elo. We're going to start with the low tier list first, and we're going to go down the tiers from top to bottom. So S-Tier, we got champions who are basically the best climbers. If you one-trick one of these guys, you're going to be basically set to climb through the ranks no matter what. These are the best low elo crushers no matter what. They're quite strong on their own. They can 1v9, they can carry, they can get a lot of work done on the map or just by themselves in a split push. So you basically want to have at least one of these champions back in your toolkit because of how powerful they can be given the right player. Darius, there's no need for explanation. He's been quite strong in the current meta. Good in low elo, good in high elo, and there's a lot of games where you can just single-handedly win. Even if it's like loss, you can just turn games around with Darius if you win enough teamfights. So he's a perfect little champion to have in your toolkit. Fiora is a champion that you might think that it's like a high elo champion, but she actually does quite well in low elo because Fiora is one of those champions that you can just kind of brute force your way through fights with, right? Because if you hit enough vitals as Fiora, you can basically just run circles around people and beat them, even if it's like a terrible matchup, you know? So Fiora is a champion where, like, let's say you know how the vitals work, you know all these tricks, all these combos, and you just play Fiora, you can basically just solo climb off of just knowing how to play that champion. She's quite versatile in terms of what you can do in the game, like split push wise, the kind of champions you can fight with her. She has a lot of great matchups into the more meta picks of nowadays, like she can basically crush a lot of these OP champions right now. So yeah, Fiora is quite good for climbing. Really underrated, but she takes a lot of work to master. And even as a low elo player, you at least have to know the basics. You can't just pick her up and, you know, win games with her. She's like I know we complain about Fiora a lot, us top laners, but she does take some skill to play and a lot of knowledge to actually know when to go for fights, you know. But even though you don't even need to know if your mechanics are good because you can just hit enough vitals and probably win the fight anyway. Olaf is a very, very easy champion to play, but he offers a lot of strength. In terms of just brain-dead fights, Olaf does quite well as he's kind of the king of brain-dead fights to an extent, because all you do is just spam your axes, spam your abilities, and just kill people, because Olaf is just good at that. He also has a lot of great matchups against a lot of these champions, because many bruisers actually rely on some key form of CC to get a kill on you, right? Darius has his hook, some champions have their whole kit's flow CC, some champions have like a crucial ability like Mordekaiser ultimate. So a lot of these abilities are really key for these champions, and Olaf can basically bypass them. And in low elo, you're talking players who don't really know that Olaf is actually pretty abusable in lane, because if you just survive the earlier lane and you can dodge Olaf's axes, you can basically just zone him off of the wave and just not let him interact at all with the minions. So like low elo players aren't going to do this, which means that you have your, like, even if the early game goes badly, you have a free ticket to level 6. You won't be abused, you can freely farm, and you can just go for kills when you have your level 6 power spikes. So he's quite a powerful champion. Shen is not like a traditional 1v9 champion you'd pick for a low elo game. Low elo is like you pick these kind of champions to get fed and kill everyone. But the thing with Shen is that, like, he is quite good at just exerting pressure on the map, you know? And in lower ranks, nobody's gonna play like Shen exists, right? Like, because everyone's just gonna go for fights, everyone's gonna go for kills around the map, assassins are gonna go in no matter what. So you have a ton of ult opportunities when, like, you know, you have your wave set up, you're gonna have a ton of opportunities to ult, because low elo players fundamentally won't think that, oh, the enemy has a Shen. So you're gonna teleport in, you're gonna get a bunch of kills, and even after you do that, they'll still play like you don't exist. So if you got your macro vision on a Shen and you're actually paying attention to the game, there's a ton of kills you can get on the map and just basically like oppress the entire enemy team solo. The thing with him is that, like, when you side lane with him, you have to be really careful about how you fight, because a lot of other silent champions basically have combat ultimates that kind of make them impossible to fight. So you have to be really careful about that. And let's say that you're beating up this Mordekaiser, right? You're just out top laning him, you've basically got a ton of kills all over the map, and then he hits level 6. you shouldn't be overconfident and like go into a fight against him because he will actually just kill you, even if he is a few kills behind. So it's like, don't have that hubris. Don't really be overconfident against champions who just tend to destroy you with their level 6, unless like you're so fed, like you have 4 or 5 kills ahead of them that it doesn't even matter like how hard they counter you, just kill them by default. But yeah, the common people on Shen is just people don't pay too much attention to like, oh, I'm gonna fight this Darius, I have 2 kills, surely he won't kill me. He kills you. So yeah, don't do that as Shen. But yeah, quite a good champion to climb with. Tryndamere. Tryndamere is one of those champions where like he is great at teaching you like a ton of concepts at once. Importance of farm, how to split push, how to basically play flanks properly, vision control macro. There's a lot of things that Tryndamere teaches. So like a new top laner starting out playing the game, I can't really recommend a better champion to learn the game with than Tryndamere. And in terms of his solo queue strength, Tryndamere can get a lot of work done, right? You can get like, he has a bunch of bad matchups, but even in those bad matches, if you play it properly, you will be able to at least survive through the lane. But the thing is, most players won't really like abuse you hard enough, right? With these kinds of champions, you really need complicated characters and just game knowledge to punish them, which low elo players won't have. So you're gonna get into so many situations where people just handshake kills that they not like survive through. No way, like they're 100, 200 health and they stay undeterred against you even though you have your ultimate. Or like they actually walk in front of you and take your auto attacks level 1, which is like completely a crazy thing to do against Tryndamere in like a lot of matchups, okay? So with Tryndamere, you can get a ton of kills against unaware opponents, so he's a great character to have in your back pocket. Great climber, so yeah. Alright, let's get to A-Tier. A-Tier are champions that are perfectly fine to climb with, but they have some problems, right? And the common problems with all these champions are going to be things like, one, they are quite difficult to play, so you as a low rank player might not be able to execute them properly or get the most out of them. Or like they maybe require some sort of game knowledge part that makes it a bit difficult to pull things off with them. Or maybe that like they're not that good in the entirety of low elo, just like the low elo. Like you can climb with this champion up until platinum, but then anything further, you're gonna basically be in trouble because the limitations of their champion are just gonna basically shine through and make the game a bit of a difficulty to play. So these are the champions that we're gonna talk about in A tier. Aatrox, a great champion, actually quite overpowered, but the thing with loyal Aatrox players is that they don't actually know how valuable all their abilities are. Commonly speaking, what they do is they just toss their abilities out on cooldown, and they'll once accidentally dash towards the enemy or waste their W, which basically opens them up to being all in then killed. So, like, you have to be really precise with how you use your abilities, right? Now, this gets much easier in high elo since, you learn to think, but if you're talking low elo, you have to be really, like, limiting yourself, right? Like if we're going to have gun talk, you got to have trigger discipline in terms of, like, okay, I'll save my Q until I can actually hit it, instead of just praying to God that I hit it and just wildly queuing the enemy when he's not even CSing, letting him dodge it, right? So, like, these are the kind of things that you gotta keep in mind while playing Aatrox, but if you do, you're gonna get a lot of work done with him, and he's actually really strong, so you can play him to, like, basically whatever rank you want to if you're climbing. Garen. Garen is a great champion, but he just tends to fall off in the higher ranks, so that's why he's, like, in A tier. Like, it gets hard to actually play him in, like, the higher portions of Diamond. A lot of matches just destroy him, and at the end of the day, he basically just turns into, like, he just runs around the map, right, and goes for picks with his ultimate. Like, he's not the best in teamfights unless the enemy has, like, one champion that's, like, the carry that you're gonna shut down. But this carry also has to be melee, because if they're not, then it's gonna be quite tough for you to actually reach the target without getting blown up. So there are a lot of problems with him that a more organized team is gonna be able to solve, like, instantly, but until then, you should be good to just climb with him. He's also, like, really simple to play, just, like, the easiest champion to play in the game in terms of top lanes, so, like, you won't, like, the starting cost of learning champions, where it's like, I gotta put in 10 games, 20 games, 50 games, 100 games. Garen doesn't really have this. 5-10 games and you're good to go to just play him like, like you main him, basically. Illaoi. Because players like to just bash their brains against each other in lower ranks, Illaoi can get a lot of work done because, like, if people fight around you, you can just get so much damage out and actually get a ton of kills and just survive until the end of the fight, which is absolutely crazy. The problem with Illaoi is that, like, the higher up you go, the more worthless she becomes. And in like high elo, practically nobody plays Illaoi because of how like useless she is, honestly. And just the fights are moving all over the place. So it's like against any competent team, Illaoi is not going to be useful at all. And also, without players that are going to like juggle their CC around and actually use their like damage properly, Illaoi gets in a lot of cases where even though she gets a good ultimate, the enemy team is strong enough to just put her down in seconds, right? Illaoi can only pop off against teams that are just inherently weak. Like your team's already winning. And in that case, like you could be playing any other champion and still win the game, right? So it's like she doesn't do that well in high elo at all, and even in like high diamond, she just struggles a lot. Irelia. Irelia is a really powerful laner, and her number one weakness is that like she has to basically either be inside the minion wave or extremely far away from it. Okay, there's no in between. She can't hover around and make options like available to her, like, oh hey, if the enemy comes, I'll back off, or like, you know, if the enemies are not here and I'm only 1v1, I can go in. She's like very one-dimensional in terms of like, if I'm gonna commit to this wave, I can't do anything else, right? I have to commit to this wave, to this fight, to this slow push, which basically means that Illaoi Irelia can be very easily countered by jungle pressure, right? Because again, because she's right in the minion wave, she's essentially in position to gank all the time, and because of like how her passive works, she has to essentially just keep the wave pushed all the time. But in lower ranks, one, junglers don't know how to play the game, right? So in a lot of cases, they won't even gank the Irelia, so she can just 1v1 spam kill the enemy, or even worse, they're not going to clear properly, so they'll walk up to the gank with like half health, and Irelia's just going to kill them with like 3 auto attacks. That'll essentially be one more minion that'll just get a Q out of. So like against bad junglers, which is basically most junglers in lower ranks, you can get a lot of work done with Irelia. Like 1v1, 1v2, even 1v3 if you're fed enough, but yeah. Jax. Jax has a lot of great matchups. Jax can get a lot of great work done. He's kind of playable into most of these champions actually, and he counters them, like he counters a bunch of them too. I would say he's a bit complicated to pull off in some cases, and there are a lot of matchups that just make life like a complete misery for him. So Jax does have that one bad dimension to think about. Kled. In low elo, a Kled can just like basically destroy the lane and then 1v9 carry the game. Kled's like a champion where he has so many base stats that once he wins the lane, he's like this avalanche of meat, just like drowning all your enemies with your ultimate, auto attacks, everything. It's just like really hard to put down a fed Kled in low ranks, especially when teams are not really organized. So they'll basically let you get your, remount without even thinking about, oh, maybe we should kill this guy while he's attacking our AD carry. It's like, no, they're not going to think about that. So, yeah, you get a lot of work done with Kled. Mordekaiser. With the Kled's issue is that, like, he gets a bit more counterable later on. Mordekaiser. Okay, I hate to comment on this constantly, but I'll talk about Kled's weaknesses in the high Elo tier list because that's when they shine the most. For the last time, Mordekaiser. Now, Mordekaiser is a great champion for low elo because of how simple he is to play. You don't gotta think a lot, you don't have to do too many complicated mechanics. The most complex thing you can do on him is basically just, I guess, flash Q, or like E and then ult so they can't walk out of the E, but then they have to be in your range, but they will because they're low elo. It's like, there's not too much to this champion, right? He's very close to like Garen in terms of simplicity, but it just takes a bit more knowledge to get going, because if you ult people stupidly, you'll just get killed, and maybe you'll kill a Nami, but your team gets slaughtered, so you're 1v4 and you just die instantly. So those are the kind of situations they want to basically avoid. Now, the reason why he's so great in low elo, aside from the fact that he's so easy to play, is that Mordekaiser is a very predictable champion. So if a person is consciously thinking about what he's going to do, what he's capable of, it's not very difficult to actually just destroy him. But that's not really done too often in low elo. Low elo players don't think about what the enemy is going to do. They just think like, oh, he might fight back. It's like, that's like the most advanced their thoughts get. It's like playing against a chess bot that just thinks one move ahead. So you're not looking at a lot of people being able to outplay you. And worst case scenario, in a lot of bad matches, you can just use your ultimate to steal the lane and just get kills anyway. The issue that Mordekaiser runs into is, one, he gets worse in higher ranks, and two, he is very bad to first pick, right? You cannot first pick Mordekaiser because there are a lot of matchups that completely just rip him to shreds, and you don't want to face them. Nasus. Nasus is a great champion in lower ranks because, again, junglers don't really know what they're doing, so the fact that you have less prio earlier on, less strength earlier on, doesn't really matter as much. So you're essentially allowed to freely get into your level 6, into the point where you're actually strong 1v1, and you can actually put up a fight against your enemy. Nasus is also amazing at fighting tanks. You can just chunk them out quite heavily without actually dying because he also himself builds tank items. So Nasus is pretty good in low ranks, can get a lot of work done. And because kiting is not really, it hasn't been invented on low ranks, you can just W ADCs and they'll just stand there as you just bonk them on the head and kill them in 2 hits. So the issues that Nasus runs into are not really that present in low elo. Ornn. Ornn is quite a solid champion, quite a big chunk of meat, a lot of work done. He can actually get a bunch of kills in lane. He trades surprisingly well for the type of champion he is. So if you understand how to play Ornn, you can basically just win lane by yourself and then use that to just be unkillable. Because an Ornn that has 1 lane is absolutely just the most impossible thing to kill unless you have a Vayne or a Kog'Maw or something. But even in a Kog'Maw is unless they have somebody dedicated to peeling that Kog'Maw, you can probably just still kill him until the end of the game where it just kills you in 5 auto attacks. So he's quite a great champion to pick up. One of the strongest tanks in the game in terms of just personal strength. So if we're talking 1v9 tanks, you basically just have Ornn to work with. Some other tanks too, but he's the best one for straight up 1v9ing, right? Shen is obviously better, in my opinion, in solo queue in terms of low ranks, but if you don't really care about macro and you just want to play on your own, Ornn is a great option. Renekton, classic, typical bruiser. If you know how to get fed, if you know how to win matchups, you know how to manage your fury, you get a lot of work done. He's just a little complicated, and also his strength of how well he can work with a jungler don't really come into play as often. Riven, great champion, just one of the best solo queue champions historically of all time. It's just that she's quite tough to play, and also she's been struggling a bit because the champions of nowadays have a lot of meat on them, right? Because the meta nowadays is big beefy characters, and a lot of these characters can just go frozen hard, first item, and make it impossible for her to even think about playing the game. So yeah, Riven has problems like that. Sejuani is a champion that I low-key slept on, but Sejuani is an insane trader. She goes in for a trade and basically just takes out half your health while CCing you. So the main issue with Sejuani players that I see is that they kind of always overcommit, right? They don't they don't use their abilities properly. And also a lot of them just run into mana issues because they won't just go the smart option, which is just you go tier, you go Ionian Boots, and you just basically just spam abilities nonstop to just win trades and get away if things go south. So I feel in a few more months or so, maybe next season, Sejuani players will get really good, right? And then at that point, she might have to get nerfed because of how powerful of a champion this can be if the right player plays it. But it's maybe I'm just tripping. Maybe Darius just beats Sejuani because he's also overpowered. But every single time I'm up against Sejuani, it's I almost always just beat them because they do stupid things, right? It's they overextend, without using their abilities, or they, they go for a trade, but they mess it up somehow. It's these things are very common, these kinds of mistakes with Sejuani players. Sett. Sett's a great champion in low elo. He is really great at just brain dead banana monkey fights. He can just get a lot of all attacks off, get a lot of healing from his passive. His W actually doesn't get dodged in low elo, so you can basically just chunk out ADCs for half their health with just a W. So he's a great champion to play in lower ranks. Singed. If you know how to proxy and stuff like that, you're gonna just absolutely roll through low elo as Singed because to beat Singed, you have to know his tricks. Most low elo players are completely oblivious. So it's let's say you're on red side and you're up against blue side. You go Hex Flash, Phase Rush, whatever. You push a big wave into the enemy, and every time you just walk around, flash over that wall with Hex Flash, and you just proxy until the end of time, right? And a lot of the times, junglers just ignore you. They don't even pay attention to the fact that you're proxying, so you can do crazy things proxy behind like proxy at T2 behind it, and just go to like the next turret and proxy 2 visit waves at once or something crazy like that. So you can get a lot of cheese things done with Singed. And while you might get like, you might die a whole bunch, but if you just kind of understand how to manage your deaths, how to go for executes, when to go for executes, your macro should be good enough to the point where you can actually see the players coming. It's like, okay, I gotta die now or else I'm gonna feed a kill. Then also be aware of how Singed, like, okay, if I meet this, this, and this condition, then I can go for a proxy. If you know all these things, they can get a lot of work done as Singed. Tahm Kench. He's a great low elo champion because he's quite hard to outplay. This also means that there's like not much you can actually mess up on this champion, right? It's like, if you just kind of are a bit patient and understand that he kind of is a bit of a slower champion, a bit more like, you shouldn't be impatient with Tahm Kench, because if you just toss everything out, you're going to be like an easy kill for most champions. But if you're a bit more like, okay, I'm going to do this, that's going to set up this, that's going to set up this, and just kind of understand the progression of abilities you got to use, they can get a lot of work done with Tahm Kench. Also, a fed Tahm Kench is going to be an absolute nightmare to face in solo queue. He did like suffer quite a bit in terms of like when they nerfed his shield, but that's more of like a high rank thing. And also with Tahm Kench, there are a lot of tricks you can do, right? This is like the main reason why he's such a good champion in lower ranks, is that like, if you like one-trick Tahm, or you know someone who one-tricks Tahm, like Watley or something, and you can just kind of learn the tricks off of him, it's like, you can get free kills in every single lane, regardless of what's happening. Like, there are a bunch of tricks you can do. And there's some champion-specific tricks you can do. Like, for example, against Darius, what you can do is, like, he gets Noxian Might, you auto-attack him 3 times, you stun him, and then as he tries to Q you or something, or as soon as he comes out of the stun, you eat him. And so, like, what happens here is that progression of stuns is long enough for Noxian Might to just go out, and Darius just loses that fight, okay? Or the enemy is pushing a big mini wave into you, but you get phase rush. So you walk into that mini wave, just as it's outside your turret, you get 3 attacks on the enemy, swallow them, and because you have phase rush, the self-slow from like your ultimate swallowing them is not that bad. Swallow them, run under your turret, spit them out, E under them, they're dead, right? Like, they legit can't fight against that. And you at least get a flash out of that, which is absolutely huge in terms of just like, you know, you can just do it again, right? You can hold waves until the end of the time, and you having shield actually helps you hold waves because like that shield is going to soak up a lot of minion damage. So like, there are a lot of things you can do with Tahm that makes life absolutely hell for your enemies. Trundle is a great champion in low elo. Really just one of those monkey banana champions that just fight the enemy with all the time. Great at killing people level 1 with lethal tempo, all that stuff. He's kind of a bit limited in terms of what he can possibly do, right? He's a little one-dimensional because he just does the same thing every game, right? But that's not really a problem in low ranks. No one's going to think about that. Everyone's just going to fight you straight up and die. Urgot. Okay, Urgot's weaker-ish low elo kind of sucks, but the thing is that like if you land your abilities and you use them correctly, you can get a lot of kills with Urgot. And also, like, his bad-ish matchups are either not too popular or they're not really played as much, I guess. So, like, the things that mess him up, let's say, are not too existent in lower ranks. So you can have a better time trying to basically get kills with him. And the thing with Urgot is once you get rolling in lane, you can actually just completely just destroy the enemy team, okay? No one's going to be kiting. No one's going to be fighting you properly. People will see you yanking the teammates. Oh, he's surely not going to fear our entire team and kill all of us. And you fear their entire team. Your team wipes their entire team. It's like, nobody expects these kinds of things. And on top of all that, Urgot is quite simple to pull off mechanically. You just kind of have a bit of knowledge to play him. But in terms of your wrists, it's like, there's no strain on them. I can guarantee you that. Volibear, quite a simple champion. You land a bunch of abilities, you get kills. Really, really easy to play. Can get a lot of work done when he's ahead. He's like, he looks like a tank, but he's actually a juggernaut because he has to be fed to get work done, and he can get it fed in a lot of cases in lower ranks. And he also has a bunch of pretty decent matchups. Like against a bunch of these meatheads, he does quite well if you play it right. Wukong. Kind of the same as Volibear, but not really. He has a lot of great matchups. Why didn't you say that? It was such a non-statement, but yeah. He has a lot of great matchups. He does well into a bunch of the meatheads. There's a bunch of outplay potential that you don't even need to harness. and he has one of the best level 6 spikes in the entire game. So if you use your ultimate properly, you can get a ton of work done, right? It's just that you have to be very careful with how you use both your gap closers, because you don't want to get into a position where you gap close onto the enemy, you greedily use both your clone and your E, that's the one that dashes the target, your W and your E, and you're now in a position where you don't have the, you know, that gap close or like the dash to dodge that vital ability. Like let's say you're fighting Fiora, you go in on her, you have to actually keep your clone to make sure you can dodge your riposte once she like maybe riposte your ultimate or something like that. So like there are a bunch of these things that you have to keep an eye out when playing Wukong so you don't get absolutely murdered. Yorick. Noah's going to abuse his early game properly. Split push is not really the meta right now, but like the thing with split push meta is that like the thing with the meta right now in terms of split push is that split push champions aren't bad, but they don't get work done by just split pushing, right? It's like the other things are really important too. And the one big thing that's important is wasting the enemy team's time, okay? That is one of the more important things you can do as a split pusher, and Yorick can't do that. His split pushers are like things you have to just hard commit on. But this is actually a good thing in low elo. Also in low elo, you're going to get so fed off of lane because people don't know how to play against Yorick that you can actually just tank 3 people, 2 people, 1v2, 1v3, and just kill them all. So yeah, he's quite good in lower ranks. Also, he's really easy to play. There's that too. It does take some knowledge in terms of split pushing, but that is basically it. Alright, we're back with B tier now. The champions of B tier can be described as being average strength. They're okay to play, you can pick them up and main them and get a lot of work done, but they have some serious issues that kind of limit their loyal prowess. Either the part of their like gameplay that requires knowledge is like something you only achieve as like a higher elo player, so you don't really get too much use out of them as a loyal player, or they get countered quite hard, maybe they rely on jungle help, things like that, right? It's like some serious things that while they might get addressed in higher ranks, don't quite get, you know, considered even in lower ranks. So let's just get right into it. Akshan requires a lot of knowledge about the map, how to move around the map, and also how to find matchups, because he does actually lose quite a ton. He also has a lot of counter matchups that kind of mess him up. So like, he's a pretty good champion if you can actually play him, but it's like if you can actually play him, right? So that's like not too easy to achieve. Camille kind of has a rough early game. She needs to get the machine item to actually do anything in game, but unfortunately, her rough early makes so that she can't actually get to that item quite easily. So like winning the lane is going to be a bit of an issue, and your jungler who's like, you know, your jungler is probably not going to realize that, hey, because we have a Camille, it should be a little bit of a priority to make sure that she kind of wins lane. So once she gets Shen, she can actually help me take down this entire enemy backline or whatever. Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is great in that if you can land your abilities, you can get a lot of work done, but the higher up you go, the worse he does. Like, the game is just too fast for him at this point. He can't really do anything. He's just a big, lumbering pile of meat that's good against specific champions, I guess, when his silence just kind of counters them. Dr. Mundo's only here because he's, like, super easy to play, right? He kind of gets countered by a lot of champions. He gets completely destroyed. And he also actually does not have a mythic to build. You might, like, oh, you can build this thing, and carry games 1v9. It's like, no. Like, he has no good mythic for him that like kind of works all the time, or like that actually synergizes with him. So Mundo is like, he kind of just sucks right now, but he's good in low elo because of how easy he is to play. And if players just sit in the lane and tank your Qs, you can actually just get kills for free without any problems. Gnar. A lot of what Gnar brings to the table isn't really appreciated or like even required in low elo, like the whole team play thing, the fact that he's a really good generalist and can just survive in lane. These are not the things that anybody cares about in low elo. In low elo, you just once you play something that you require game knowledge to win the game with, or you have to master, get kills with to get fed, and you pick that champion, get fed, carry the game. Gnar can't really do that too well. He can carry a bunch of team fights, right? If you get fed with him, he can be like an absolute menace for the enemy team. But to do that, you have to be like extraordinarily fed. Like, just winning lane is not really enough to be like an insane menace in team fights. So like, because he's not the best at some things, just okay at a lot of things at once, he is not going to do too well in lower ranks. Gwen's kind of been suffering a bit ever since the durability changes. She's an okay champion to have in your champion pool. Actually could just fill a lot of like gaps in a lot of people's champion pools, but one, she's a bit tough to play, and two, she gets messed up in a lot of matchups. Kayle sucks in solo queue, but because she's like, you know, like you having an early game that's basically non-existent doesn't really matter as much in low elo as I mentioned with the Nasus matchup or like the Nasus champion. You can basically just like bunker down, like survive laning phase and wait until you can get fed enough to win the game. So yeah. Also, Kayle has a very underrated 1v1. A lot of people don't even think about how well she can 1v1 some champions, but if you like level 1, you just straight up beat a lot of champions, and in the other levels, let's say you're up against Camille, you can rank that ability that like slows, and these slow is like so crazy and it's like so hard to miss that it's like you can basically just kite people for days using that. So yeah, she's quite okay in lower ranks. Lilia is pretty good in lower ranks, one because she's super easy to play, two, a lot of champions will just play into you, right? They won't really okay, once Lilia has all of her stacks, maybe I shouldn't trade with her because she'll just get away with everything. They'll just straight up fight you and let you get free Qs off on her, and you can just go back and forth and just kill someone once they're low enough. So there's a lot you can do with Lilia. There are also a lot of meathead champions played at these kinds of ranks that you can just completely counter as Lilia, because, you know, if you're talking like an Ornn or something, or like, you know, maybe like a Volibear, you can just like completely dog on them and they can't really counter you because, you know, they're just standing there, slowly walking, waiting for you to go for an all-out fist fight, but you don't take those, you just go for the weird fights and you win them because you're Lilia. Pantheon, pretty good champion. If you know how to win lane with him, you can take over the game by yourself, but it just takes a bunch of like work to get off the ground. Quinn, she's essentially just like Shen, but a little easier to play in my opinion. Like, the thing with Quinn is that she's better at 1v1s. She has a faster roam, but like overall in sorts of bigger fights with multiple champions, she's a lot less fluid, right? Akshan can get a lot more done, so he's a bit more difficult, but you get a lot more out of him. But she's basically just him, but easier to play. So it's like a trade-off, right? And because we're considering difficulty of play in this tier list too, like easier champions get like a boost in low elo, we are considering that as well. Rengar top, quite versatile, can get a lot of work done with him. Just really tricky to get into. Rengar top is like a very unique champion, so you have to basically just one trick him to even like get good enough at him to beat your get good enough at him to like not lose some of the tougher matchups, because you really have to just completely switch up your playstyle and be really versatile with like how you play this one champion to survive against some of the more tougher characters like a Darius or like a Trundle or something, a Kled. Teemo is like the easiest ranged top laner to play in the lower ranks, but the reason I put him at B tier is that like the difficulty of him is like so crazy in high elo. So I'm just gonna change it to like just yellow for low elo, but it is crazy high. Anyway, Teemo. He's quite an easy range top laner to play. A lot of champions will just kind of like play into you. They'll walk over your shrooms. They'll waste their abilities while you have them blinded. So it's like you get a lot of opportunities with him to just completely destroy people and make the game basically unplayable for them. Vladimir. You can just basically just sit in lane, wait until you scale. Not really much to talk about. He's great at just scaling, I guess. His early game sucks, but that doesn't really matter too much. Warwick. Warwick is a very useless champion for the team. He just goes out there. He doesn't do that much damage. He's not that tanky. His CC is not that good. It's like his ultimate can just be peeled off with any other bit of CC. Like, Warwick does not do anything that great, okay? Except for cheesing kills in lane. So if you have a matchup that you hate playing against, and like, you know, maybe you've not been able to fight them ever, then maybe you can just pull that rare Warwick out and then just play the game just to cheese kills against that one matchup. But aside from that, I don't really see any use of having Warwick in your champion pool. Yone, quite tough to play. You gotta basically just outplay players constantly. Once you understand how like strong Yone is actually in sorts of meaty fights because of Lethal Temple, you can actually get a lot of work done as him. The difficulties are that he's quite hard to play, and if you just start losing as him, you're gonna get farmed for kills non-stop. You're like a minion at that point, and in some cases it's like you have to constantly use your ultimate to escape, right? You can't even farm without having that like escape option with you. Kind of just sucks when behind. Alright, we're at C tier. C tier champions are just like B tier but weaker. The weaknesses that they've had, like in terms of difficulty, in terms of like, oh, you need good macro to play them or whatever, it's like these difficulties just get increased exponentially, or these are just champions that like aren't really good carry champions. Maybe they don't do enough damage, they can't really 1v9 a game, things like that. Gangplank. Gangplank is quite a tough champion to play, which basically reduces his spot in our Elo tier list. Not to mention how there are a lot of matchups who beat him up, and also he's not really a champion who's gonna get fed and carry the game. Gangplank kind of just works with his team in that you put him top lane, he's a good weak side top laner that's gonna just survive, get a bunch of gold, help out with his ultimate, and he's gonna eventually be another source of backline damage. Gangplank, all this is not that useful in higher elos. And also, he kind of just gets to a point where unless you keep people at arm's length with your barrels, he kind of just gets destroyed in side lane against some of these champions that are better at 1v1s. Akali, I wouldn't say she's terrible, but she just can't put up a fight against a lot of these meatbags earlier on, right? Her early laning is really bad. Now, if you can kind of just get through that, you do get a very powerful level 6 to just get a bunch of kills with, but it's I hate to admit it because I actually hate Akali as an idea, but she is kind of tricky to play, right? You have to kind of use your abilities properly, make sure you get your damage out instead of just wasting all your abilities. Not wasting your abilities, because if you do, if you put your smoke in the wrong location, you're just dead basically, unless you use your ultimate to get out of the situation. It's you have to be very open to what she's capable of, and also very patient to not waste your abilities, So and also actually I have the mechanics to play her, but I really wouldn't recommend playing Akali because I don't think you can climb with her too much, right? There's some champions that just completely turn you into cat food, so I wouldn't really go for her. Cassiopeia, great counter, but again, bunch of bad matchups. If you kind of just pick her into the right champion, you can just completely 1v9 the game. That's no problem. But yeah, not much to say. Karma doesn't carry games. Is just there to annoy the enemy top laner. The secondary support thing of top lane is not the support role doesn't really work in Loyola because your teammates aren't going to be, too good at the game. So, if you can't have a lot of personal power, then going for a supportive role, supportive playstyle is not too well in lower ranks. Malphite, he works well as a counter. He is super easy to play, but that's basically it. He's just there to counter a bunch of auto-tanking champions. I do get that there are a lot of low-elo Malphite mains to slap people left and right, but the truth is you're better off with a champion that can get a lot more work done, who isn't reliant on having an ultimate to actually work. Because, again, in low-elo, fights are going to happen all the time. So what would you rather have? A champion who's actually good at fighting, or a champion who's only good at fighting without one ability, right? In this kind of chaotic meta, it's better to have one champion who's going to actually put up a decent fight no matter what's happening. So Malphite kind of just gets he's not good enough basically to be that kind of 1v9 climbing champion you need to have in your back pocket. Maokai is kind of similar to Malphite in that he doesn't carry, he's a tank, he doesn't do too much damage. He basically just wins the lane through slow meticulous trades and stuff, which is quite not a lot of people will be able to do, but it's not that difficult to do either. It's just about knowing how to play the champion, I guess. But I don't know. He is kind of easy to play, I will admit that. So he kind of goes higher in the tier list. But the thing with Maokai is he's quite a defensive champion, right? Maokai is very slow. He's very it takes time for him to get his things done. And while we kind of know that, okay, it doesn't matter if it's slow, no one's going to predict it in high-low. It's if it's slow and aggressive, it's okay, fine, right? Like a Mordekaiser. You Q someone, they can predict you're going to Q, they can predict where you're going to Q, but they're not going to do anything against it because they're low-low. As Maokai, you can't really do anything aggressive, right? You're just kind of on the defense all the time. You got a lot of tools to be defensive and maybe just cheese kills through that defense, but it's you're not going to be the carry. Okay, you're not going to do too much with your team. So it's his strengths aren't really that valuable until you get to play with someone who's actually competent on your team. Gragas. Gragas is a great blind pick. He's good at holding lane, but you don't need to hold lane. You need to win lane and make use of your strength to moment in game, which Gragas he isn't quite good at. Sion, you're probably not going to have the macro and etc. knowledge to be really good at Sion. And also Sion has a lot of terrible matchups, so yeah, he's quite tough to pick first. Vayne, decent first pick, right? Quite good at counter picking, but range top laners aren't good to play in low ranks, just to be honest. You're better off playing some sort of melee make bag in general, and Vayne basically suffers from everything that a low range top laner suffers from, which is that she's really gankable. You kind of mess up your team comp. And also, if you're picking Vayne top, you better be very careful about when you pick her, because she actually does have bad matchups too, right? So yeah, Zac, he kind of just acts as like a secondary support, in my opinion. Doesn't get too much work done. And also, while you're going to get a lot of kills using tricks, it might actually be like really good at trading. It's not like Sejuani, where it's like you can basically just go in, take half someone's health out, and then just leave. He's more so like, oh, I'm going to stay outside of my lane, and once you try to auto-attack my turret, then I'm going to jump on you and, you know, trick you and kill you like that, or like things like that, you know? He also is like quite a supported champion, as I've mentioned. He's like, it's not about you, it's about you get some work done, and then, whatever, top lane, you just go around the map and just kill everyone, and it's not too valuable in lower ranks, I mean, so yeah. D tier, these guys are just the worst of the worst. Rise sucks, no need to explain anything else. Yeah, so it's too difficult to play. He also can't put up a fight against the meatheads. Swain can't defend himself from a lot of people trying to kill him. Jace needs so much skill to play, and he doesn't even do that much compared to some of these champions. So, like, as a low elo player, unless you like main him and you're just stuck with him, I recommend staying away from him. I guess if you're clean enough, you can get a lot of work done anyway into some of these matchups, but I don't know, man. He kind of just sucks nowadays. I'm not saying that I'm sad because I hate the Jace matchup, but it's like, the thing is, he's one of the champions that requires a lot of skill, and it's kind of tragic that he's so weak. So yeah. Kennen, with Kennen, you're kind of just there to survive in lane, because Kennen is not a very aggressive champion. Sure, he can get a lot of good trades going, but he doesn't do that much damage. He doesn't really do like the best of anything. He can kind of just survive. That's his thing, right? Surviving well enough until level 6. Can he get a kill? Good. Can he not? Survive until can he use his ultimate in team fights? That's his bread and butter. Team fights, right? You can get a lot of work done in team fights, a lot of stuns. And in some team compositions, it can be actually quite killer to have Kennen in it, but I don't know. I don't think he's quite good in the current, the way that like loyal players play the game nowadays. So I suggest staying away from him. If you're playing like a ranged champion, you better just learn Akshan. He's like infinitely better, or even like a Vlad or something, so you can scale. It's like anything else, like any other role that like you want to fill with a ranged top lane. It's like you can find a ranged top lane that fills it better than Kennen, right? Because Kennen kind of relies on his teammates to actually get some work done, because he's like there to provide the CC. All right, let's go through the high elo tier list real quick. Aatrox is a great champion high elo. You're mastering this champion's abilities. You're more patient with him. You can land your abilities more, use them more intelligently, better at matchups. Aatrox is really hard to put down. He does a ton of damage as he kills you. So yeah, one of the strongest champions right now, and he will be until the end of the season. Same for Darius, really tough guy, quite hard to put down. He does have some matches where he's completely terrible in, but a lot of matches where he's just great, and some that he just single-handedly wins, so great champion to have in your back pocket. Fiora, pretty good. I mean, there's not really anything different to say about her. Like, that changes in high-elo. You're just getting better at her. You're better at matchups, etc. She's got a lot of great matchups into, like, the higher tier picks. It's like, I think her matchups are the thing that puts her so high up here. Ornn, great champion, really strong, really powerful. The things he does for his team actually come into play a lot more often. Riven is just like your perfect solo champion. She's always going to be good. Shen is, as usual, great. Nothing really different here. A-tier, Camille gets helped out more, so that's really good. She can get more work done. Gragas, the strength at which he holds lanes is actually so important. Like, it's a lot more important to just hold lanes on weak side as, you know, a high-elo top laner. And he's also a great blind pick, so he's a great champion to have in your back pocket. Jax is great, a lot of great matchups, can get a lot of work done. Olaf starts getting countered a bit more. People start to understand his weaknesses and abuse him, but he's still a great champion if you pick him in the right comps, into right champs/comps. Renekton is great. Although his solo carry power is a bit reduced, he is like, his usefulness in a jungle gank setting or like a team setting is a bit more realized because of how players tend to play with each other. That point and click stun is going to be super, super vital. Sejuani, nothing different. Great trades, can get a lot of work done if the person playing her is good enough. Tryndamere, I'd say a bit weaker, mostly because he just gets outshined by a lot of these champions, a lot. Next tier, B tier, Akshan. Nothing really too different, right? Like, just He'd be better at roaming and stuff, but also his bad matches are going to be a bit more prevalent, going to be a bit more in his face. Holding lane is much more important, so Gangplank's here. Gnar, basically just a B-tier normal champion, nothing really different except, like, he's not going to get a lot more stuff done in lane. The lane is going to be a bit more neutral for him. He's there to hold lane and perform in teamfights, basically. Gwen, great in some matchups, not too good in some. She can kind of kill tanks quite well, but some matches just kind of destroy her. Nothing really changed here. Irelia, not much change here as well. She's jungler food. Since junglers gank more, she goes down a tier. Cannon, what he does is more valuable, holding lane and then, popping off in teamfights. Sets up a lot of kills for his team. Maokai, similar thing. Him being more useful in teamfights and stuff is really important, and also because they buffed him, he's actually he's much stronger than he used to be, because before he was just unplayable, but now you can actually get a lot of work done with him as like a supportive kind of top laner. Pantheon, the only reason Pantheon is in B tier in my tier list or anybody else's tier list for highlight is because of Spear Shot. He's like just Spear Shot, nobody else. So yeah, Pantheon just can get a bunch of kills in lane if he plays it properly, but that's kind of difficult to do. Can get a lot of roams out using his ultimate, but like, I don't know. There are better roaming champions out there, so he's not going to be any higher tier. Quinn, just kind of like a worse Akshan, but not worse enough to warrant like a lower tier. Rengar, nothing different. Singed. People are a bit more used to your tricks, so it's hard to pull them on people and just, trap people in like circles of cheese where you constantly just proxy or do whatever thing and just constantly just get ahead despite dying like 10 times. Sion, you can actually get a lot of work done, but you got to be very careful when you pick him. He's just like destroyed by a lot of bad matchups. Tahm, people are used to his tricks. People can actually know how to fight him. Him having a weaker sort of like his 1v1 being like nerfed impacted higher elo a lot more because people are gonna be a lot better at playing against him, right? Teemo, if you master this guy, he's amazing. A lot of great matchups, counters a bunch of the annoying matchups in top lane. You gotta just know how to use your shrooms, because if you don't use your shrooms, you're kind of just like a really bad DPS character with like some counter against players who use auto attacks. But if you can use your shrooms properly and like make it impossible for the enemy team to move without sweeper, you can get a lot of work done. You do have to pick him into the right into the right match, so you actually have prio, because without prio, you actually don't have the time to push shrooms around, right? Trundle, just worse in high ranks. I think he should be in the C tier actually. So yeah, Trundle's just worse. Udyr top, just kind of a big meathead, can get a lot of work done, quite versatile in his choices. If you play him properly and uses like CC immunity properly, you can get out from a lot of bad situations. So yeah, pretty good. Vladimir, despite the fact that like the whole early game weak thing is quite bad in high elo, the fact that Vladimir scales up to being such a monster is actually quite useful. Like, you basically just help him get through laning phase and he gets 2 items and now he's like a team fighting monster. Wukong, kind of suffering a bit earlier on, gets out-meted a lot. It might be a struggle to get to your level 6 sometimes. Yone, really difficult to play him. You have to just kind of constantly outplay your enemies. At least you have the early meat to actually play the game, so that's nice. Zac, the old supportive play style becomes a lot more valuable in high elo, so you can actually play him top. Just try to win trades, try to cheese kills, but for the most part, just go around the map, ganking your team and making sure everybody's ahead. C tier, Akali, same-ish. Cassio, just a counter pick. Garen gets more useless in the higher ranks because he's just one-dimensional, can't really outplay, not really good at anything. Jace, a bit better in high elo, but not by that much, right? Like, you're going to be good enough to make use of him, but this is like as high as you can go in terms of usefulness. Karma's like, I guess, okay, but like, even in high elo, because of the meta, I think it's better to go for a supportive tank instead of a support, like enchanter support. So she's like down here. Kale, she gets abused super hard, so not as strong as she used to be. Kled, basically every single champion, or like most of these champions, have really good matchups against Kled, or they have playable matchups to the point where like you can't actually be guaranteed to get fed every single game as Kled, right? Winning lane is more of an if in high elo rather than like, when. So Kled just kind of does struggle. If he wins lane, he can 1v9, but like, it's just a big if, right? Anybody with their head on their shoulders who knows the matchup is going to completely tear you to shreds, or at least not feed you, which is enough in a lot of cases. Malphite, he's just reduced to a counter, a really great counter, but just a counter. His kind of, uselessness when he's just like, he's only useful when his ult is up is not too much of a problem in higher ranks because you can just play around that. Mordekaiser, really predictable. Really easy to counter pick. You should never first pick Mordekaiser. Similar situation with Sett. He also gets worse because players tend to like predict things more, dodge things more. So you really have to just play him into the right matchup and abuse your power. Kind of same as Mordekaiser. Urgot. His early gets abused a bit more. People are better at matchups. You are a bit more consistent in terms of just helping your team or like not considered like securing kills with your flash E or whatever, but I wouldn't say he's too good of a champion. Vayne is a great counter for a lot of these characters. If you kind of pick an entire team with Vayne, you can absolutely 1v9, but okay, TV. Okay. If you kind of pick an entire team with Vayne, you can absolutely just 1v9 and take control of games single-handedly, but like that's like a very minor case. D tier, Cho'Gath kind of just sucks. Everyone's too fast. Everyone's too able to play the game. Everybody has hands. Mundo sucks. He does nothing useful. Illaoi sucks. Just I didn't even have to explain this. Lily is terrible high early because the matches that she's really good against are like they're not really played in high ranks aside from just Ornn, I guess. And aside from Ornn, she just kind of gets destroyed. Actually, the reason she's so good on low elo because low elo players don't even read her abilities. She's one of like the champions that have been around not so long, so that you'll have more players who don't know what she's doing, which basically leads to you being able to pick up more kills. But these guys will know what you're doing, and it's like you play Illaoi against like a Fiora or something. It's just like goodbye. Nasus, the weak early game really does suck. I don't really see him being too useful unless you play into something that's like specifically countered by your W. The worst thing about him is that like he just does W in early fights. In early fights pre-6, all he does is offer W into the skirmish. So river fights, invades, invade defenses. In every single situation, it's like you're at a loss if you have Nasus on your team. And also, he's not going to have any like prio. So if the enemy team wants any top jungle, they can just completely raid your entire top side. So you basically like are better off kind of weak siding because he has no strength to help you with. But because he's weak early, you can just get farmed with kills. So yeah, not the best character. Rise sucks. Yasuo's too difficult. Just give up. Play a better champion. Play Yone. At least he has some strengths, right? Swain sucks. Volibear is too predictable, too slow, too terrible. Warwick is useless, and Yorick, it's just not the kind of split push meta he's good at. Whew. All right, everybody. Let's see you guys next one. Peace out.